I want you to picture a scenario. And it's a scenario that, I mean, it plays out in almost every corporate tower, every office park in the world,
Oh, I think I know this one.
right? A company decides it's time for a renovation. The lease is signed, the budget is set,
Yeah.
they pick out the sleek desks, the ergonomic chairs, maybe a ping pong table for the break room because, culture.
Of course. On paper, it looks so simple.
It looks like a shopping trip. You buy the stuff, you put it in the room. Done.
That is the dream.
Yeah.
The static, simple dream of the built environment.
But then reality hits. The project starts, and suddenly it is just absolute chaos. The budget is blown before the drywall is even painted.
Mm-hmm.
The timeline slides by 6 weeks because, I don't know, a specific bracket for a specific monitor arm is back-ordered. And by the end of it, the project manager looks 10 years older.
Totally drained.
Why does this happen? We aren't building a rocket ship here. We're moving furniture.
Well, it feels like it should be simple, but the logistics of modern interiors are actually weirdly closer to building a jet engine while you're flying it. Wow.
And the sources we have today, this whole stack of research papers, a dissertation, industry white papers, they all argue that this chaos isn't just bad luck.
It's not just incompetent project managers.
No, not at all. It is structural.
And they have a name for it, which I find, equal parts fascinating and terrifying. The complexity tax.
It's a great term, and it's not a metaphor. The central argument here is that in the contract furniture industry, the cost isn't really the desk. The cost is the friction of getting that desk to the person who needs to sit at it.
Okay, so let's get specific. When these sources talk about a complexity tax, how are they defining that? Because I assume it's not an actual line item on the invoice that says tax for making this difficult.
It might as well be. They define it as the marginal increase in the total delivered cost.
So the final price tag.
The final price
Yeah.
tag, right, that is attributable to coordination structures that are, well, just way more complicated than they need to be. Okay, let me translate that into human. We are creating systems that are harder than they need to be, and we are paying a premium for that complexity.
Exactly. And the premium is massive. One of the right papers breaks down projects into low complexity and high complexity.
Right.
On a low complexity project, the non-product costs, so we're talking project management labor, logistics, handling claims, fixing mistakes, all that stuff, eats up about 18 to 25% of the total budget.
Which seems, I don't know, kind of standard. You expect to pay for shipping and management.
Right. But then you look at the high complexity projects, and that same non-product cost, it jumps to somewhere between 38 and 55%.
Wait, pause there. You're telling me that on a bad project, more than half the money isn't even buying the furniture. It's just evaporating into managing the mess.
Precisely. That gap, that difference between 25% and 55%, that is the complexity tax. You are essentially burning cash to subsidize a broken coordination system.
That is just a staggering inefficiency. I mean, if you told a CEO that half their budget was going to coordination friction, they'd fire everyone in the room.
You'd think so.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out why this is happening. We need to unpack the anatomy of this problem.
Okay.
And the sources point to a statistical reality they call the power law, or the 5% standard.
This is where the math gets really interesting. The research indicates that in the furniture world, about 5% of the specific product codes,
Right.
they represent about 90% of what actually gets installed.
So 5% of the options make up 90% of the volume.
Right.
We're talking the standard white desk, the scan.
Sure. Yep, the usual suspects.
Okay.
But the inverse is where the deemings live. The remaining 95% of the product universe, the long tail, that creates a disproportionate amount of the chaos. This is where you have endless variations.
Mm-hmm.
I want this specific textile from a boutique mill in Belgium on this specific frame from a manufacturer in Michigan.
And the sources use a term for this that I absolutely love, option entropy.
It's a term borrowed from physics. Entropy is disorder. When you have infinite choice without strict rules, you get what they call combinatorial explosion.
Which sounds dangerous.
It is, financially. It means the product platform exposes hundreds of options, but there is no compatibility logic. There are no guardrails.
Give me a real-world example of what that looks like on the ground.
Okay, say a designer falls in love with a heavy textured wool fabric. They specify it for a task chair. The system lets them order it because there's no rule saying they can't.
Okay.
A quote is generated. A purchase order is signed. And then, 3 weeks later, the factory tries to pull that thick wool over the curve of the chair and it bunches up. The upholstery machine jams.
And now you get the phone call.
The dreaded call, we can't build this. Now you have to reselect. The timeline slips. And here is the key concept from the papers. Variance amplification.
Okay.
That small change upstream, the fabric rejection, it causes a massive tsunami downstream. Now the installers are scheduled for Tuesday, but the chairs aren't there. The truck is empty.
And this leads right into the mostly ready trap. This was one of the most painful parts of the reading for me because I have seen this happen so many times.
Oh, it is the silent killer of margins. Construction teams are under immense pressure to hit dates. So they release a zone, say, the third floor as mostly ready.
Yeah, mostly ready.
Yeah. Maybe the carpet is done, but the paint is still wet in the corner, or the power isn't live yet.
But the furniture truck is already at the dock.
So the installers go up, they try to work around the painters, they install half the desks, but they can't finish because the electricians are in the way, so they have to leave, and then they have to come back later. That's called remobilization.
And I assume the installers do not come back for free.
Never. Every single time they leave and come back, it costs money. It just destroys the profit margin. But worse than the money, the sources talk about the human toll.
Right.
They use a phrase that really stuck with me. Normalized exhaustion.
Yeah, that hit hard. The idea that we have just accepted that everyone involved in these projects is going to be completely burned out by the end of it.
It's almost treated as a badge of honor. Oh, I pulled an all-nighter to get the bid out. But the sources argue that if your project only succeeds because a project manager stayed up until 2 a.m. fixing a spud sheet by hand.
You're working in a dead structure.
Exactly. You're in a dead structure.
Talk to me about that. Dead structure versus a live structure. It sounds a little philosophical.
It is, but it's also very practical. A dead structure relies on human heroics to function. It doesn't have its own intelligence. It literally consumes the energy of the people inside it just to keep moving. It hides costs until they explode.
So if the system only works because Dave in accounting is a wizard who catches all the errors, the system is dead.
Exactly. Because what happens when Dave gets sick? The whole thing collapses. And a live structure, on the other hand, has clear boundaries. It has feedback loops. If something goes wrong, the system detects it and corrects it, rather than requiring a human to suffer for it.
Okay, so we have a dead structure. We have a complexity tax eating half our budget. We have normalized exhaustion. Let's pivot to the solution. How do we bring this system to life? The sources propose something called a pattern language.
This concept actually comes from Christopher Alexander, a pretty famous architectural theorist. The idea is that you don't need a rigid rule book that says do exactly this every time.
Right.
You need a set of reusable solutions to recurring problems, patterns.
Okay, let's walk through the specific patterns mentioned in the text. The first one is option families. This addresses that entropy problem we talked about.
Right. Currently, if you ask a designer to pick a finish, you give them a flat list of like 1,000 options. It's overwhelming and risky. Option families changes the game by grouping those options not by color, but by delivery behavior.
Delivery behavior, what does that mean?
Think about it in terms of risk. Family A might be standard laminates. We know the supply chain is solid, lead time is 4 weeks, damage risk is low.
Safe choice.
The safe choice. Family B might be exotic veneers. Lead time is 16 weeks, high volatility, high risk of damage.
So when I'm picking blue, I'm not just picking a color, I'm actually picking blue that arrives on time versus blue that might delay the project by 2 months.
Exactly. It constrains the state space. It makes the consequence of the choice visible at the moment of selection, not 6 weeks later when it's too late. It empowers the designer to manage that risk.
I like that. It's just transparency. The second pattern is binary zone readiness. This one feels a bit militant, but I can see why it's necessary.
It has to be militant. It's the antidote to that mostly ready trap. The rule is simple. A zone is either ready or not ready. There is no gray area.
And who decides that?
It requires sign-off from the client, the general contractor, and the installer. If the carpet isn't done, not ready. If the power isn't live, not ready.
And if it's not ready?
Nothing ships. The truck does not leave the warehouse.
I can just hear the project manager screaming, "We can't stop the shipment just because of one paint touch-up."
It sounds harsh, but the data shows it actually saves time. By preventing the installers from entering a fail state, you avoid that whole remobilization loop. You protect the flow. It forces the upstream trades, the painters, the electricians, to actually finish their work.
It holds the line.
Yeah.
Okay, the third pattern is consolidated ship point strategy.
This one addresses the logistics chaos. So instead of 5 different manufacturers shipping directly to the job site whenever their trucks happen to be ready,
A total free-for-all.
total free-for-all. You use supplier clustering, you consolidate everything at a local warehouse, you hold it there until the zone is binary ready, then you ship to the site by zone.
So you're not getting a truckload of chairs for the third floor while you're still pouring concrete on the first floor.
Precisely. The metric they track here is touch counts. Every time a human touches a piece of furniture, loading it, unloading it, moving it out of the way of a painter, the risk of damage goes up. Simplicity means fewer touches.
So those are the operational patterns. But the sources take this a huge step further. They argue that to truly fix this, we need to move into the technological layer. They introduce a concept called standards as code, or SEC.
This is really the future of the industry. Currently, corporate standards are usually a PDF. Here are the brand guidelines. And let's be honest, nobody reads the PDF.
Yeah?
Or if they do, they interpret it differently. Standards as code moves those rules from a static document into a computational rule engine.
It moves from a trust me model to a show me model.
Exactly. The rules are baked right into the software.
And central to this is the SAC score algorithm.
I was looking at the breakdown of this score in the dissertation, and it's fascinating because it doesn't care at all about aesthetics. It's not scoring style points.
Not at all. It scores a product or a typical, like a workstation setup, from 0 to 100 based purely on risk and reliability.
Walk us through the weighting because this really shows what the system values. So compliance and safety is 20 points. Does it meet fire codes? Is it tip tested? Then you have operational reliability at 18 points. Is the supply chain stable? And then maintainability is 10 points. If a leg breaks, can I replace just the leg or do I have to buy a whole new table?
That maintainability piece is huge. We rarely think about that during the shiny design phase.
Exactly. And there is a brilliant mechanism in the algorithm called the confidence adjustment.
How does that work?
If data is missing, say, a manufacturer can't tell you the lead time variance for a specific chair, the score gets penalized. You cannot get a high score with low information.
That is clever. It forces transparency. If you want to be in the system, you have to provide the data.
And then there are hard gates. Gate 0. This is the kill switch. If a product has a safety hazard, or if it can't be serviced in the region where the office is built, it gets a hard stop. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is. If you can't fix it when it breaks, it scores a 0.
This leads to a governance model the papers describe as default allow versus exception prove. This seems like the crucial part for implementation, but also maybe the part that might annoy people.
It acts as the immune system of the project. If you pick something from the approved universe, that safe 5% that scores high, it flows through the system without any friction. Default allow, that's the easy button.
But let's say I'm a designer and I really want a specific custom piece from that long tail. The system doesn't just say no, right?
No, it says prove it, exception proof. You have to provide a reason code. Is there an acoustic requirement? Is it for a specific executive application? And crucially, you have to acknowledge the cost and lead time delta.
So I can have the custom Italian marble table, but I have to digitally sign a waiver saying, I understand this costs 3 times as much and will delay the project by 8 weeks.
Correct. It separates requirements, things you need, like accessibility compliance, from preferences, which are aesthetic upgrades. Preferences are allowed, but they are labeled as upgrades, and the cost is made visible immediately.
Now, there is a trust element here. If I'm a buyer, how do I know the algorithm isn't rigged? The sources mention something called fiduciary AI.
This addresses the elephant in the room, opacity. In the furniture industry, margins are often hidden, rebates are hidden. As a buyer, you rarely know if a dealer is recommending a chair because it's good for you or because they make an extra 10% margin on it.
So fiduciary AI acts like a financial fiduciary.
Hmm.
It has a legal or structural obligation to me.
It acts as a client-aligned advocate. It uses the data to show you apples-to-apples comparisons. It flags conflicts of interest. It optimizes for outcome reliability, not vendor margin. It's the wedge that forces transparency into the market.
I can hear the designers listening to this getting nervous. They're thinking, great, you've turned my creative job into a spreadsheet. You've automated the soul out of the room.
That is the common fear, for sure. But the sources introduce a concept to counter that called spatial intelligence, or, and I love this term, vibe coding.
Vibe coding. It sounds like something from TikTok.
It does, but the concept is actually very freeing. The idea is that the designer focuses on the narrative, the experience, the vibe. They say, I want a warm, mid-century modern feel for a collaborative space.
And AI does the grunt work.
The AI handles the guardrails. It says, okay, Here are the pre-approved, high-scoring kits that match that vibe. The designer isn't fighting with part numbers or checking fire codes or worrying if the fabric fits the chair. They are designing within a safe system.
So it's fast without chaos.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, nobody became an interior designer because they love cross-referencing SKU numbers in Excel. This removes the low-value work so they can focus on the high-value work, the human experience.
But we have to talk about implementation. Because you can have the best software in the world, but if the people revolt, it fails. And people hate change. The papers actually have a blueprint for how to adopt without revolt.
And the key is, do not start with a mandate. If you walk in on day one and say, the robot is in charge now, you will have a rebellion.
Right, so phase 1 is reveal truth.
Just show the data. Look at the rework costs on the last project. Look at the delays. Let the pain make the argument for you. Don't force a solution. Just illuminate the problem.
And then phase 2 is the assistive layer.
Right. You introduce the standards as a helper, not a cop. Here are some pre-approved kits that will save you time. Let people experience the relief of not having to hunt for specifications.
And only after that do you flip the default.
Phase 3, standard becomes the default. Custom requires the exception-proof step. But by then, the team realizes that the guardrails actually create freedom. They aren't drowning in administrative tasks anymore.
It reminds me of that quote, discipline equals freedom. If you have the discipline of the system, you have the freedom to be creative without the chaos.
And that leads us to the simplicity dividend.
Which is the opposite of the complexity tax.
When you get this right, you don't just save money, you get reduced cycle times, fewer claims, predictable schedules, and honestly, a happier team. The burnout fades away.
It brings us back to that core philosophy, alive versus dead structures.
That is the heart of this deep dive. A dead system relies on heroics. It hides costs. It waits for things to break and then panics. An alive system has clear boundaries. It has feedback loops. If something goes wrong, the system learns from it.
It really feels like the industry doesn't need to work harder. I think everyone is already working incredibly hard, needs to structure its coordination differently.
Complexity is a choice. We often think it's inevitable. Oh, construction is just messy. That's just how it is. But it's not. Simplicity is a discipline. It takes work to build these patterns, but once you have them, the payoff is immense.
So we've covered the tax, the entropy, the patterns, and the code. But I want to leave the listener with a thought the sources bring up at the very end. It's a bit of a provocation.
It asks if we can use standards as code to fix furniture, which is this incredibly messy, tangible human thing involving trucks and elevators and paint. What other broken systems could we fix?
Could we apply this to healthcare logistics, to urban planning, to our own personal renovations?
It's a powerful lens. Once you see the complexity tax, you start seeing it everywhere. And once you see the patterns to fix it, you want to apply them everywhere.
So next time you walk into a beautifully finished office, take a look at the chair you're sitting in and ask yourself, did this chair get here through heroics, spreadsheets, and burnout? Or was it the result of an alive, simple system? Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.